Hi, everyone, and welcome to our Q&A to go with the story of plastic. We're just going to kind of take things slow as we let people enter the room. I know you're all sort of jumping on, and I just want to welcome you and thank you for joining us. So let's just give it a minute before I launch into introducing all of our guests to allow everyone to join the room. All right, so while we're joining, maybe I'll just give a little quick introduction about our programming. So to introduce myself, my name is Joanne Parsont. I am the Director of Education for the California Film Institute. And we are so thrilled to have this film, The Story of Plastic, playing in our virtual screening room. We originally, CFI Education was originally planning this really wonderful, our annual Environmental Youth Forum at the end of April. And we, of course, were not able to hold that live, but we were really thrilled that we were able to bring a few films that we could celebrate the environmental youth with us. Yeah. Hey, Sam, it looks like you might have a second. I'm not sure where you're. You guys see that? Can we maybe get? There we go. Excellent. Sorry about that. So this is basically part of our Environmental Youth Forum at home. And I really want to thank, in particular, our community partner for this whole series, Children for Change. We've worked with them a lot in the last year or two, and we did our first screening of this series last week with Microplastic Madness. We'll be doing another screening in 2 weeks with a film called 2040 that we'll be announcing shortly. And they just have been a really great support in working with us and sharing this film with their students, and also have created some really great curriculum resources to go along with the film that you can find on the Rafael film page where you registered for this Q&A. So if you are interested or didn't catch that while you were on there and want to check out those curriculum resources, I strongly encourage you to take a look. So I want to welcome our awesome special guests. First off, we have the Director of Story of Plastic, Deia Schlosberg, live from Schenectady. And I would like to welcome one of the film subjects, Martin Bourque, the Executive Director of the Ecology Center in Berkeley. And two special guests also from who were once local. I know Chloe is not anymore. Who were not featured in the film, but these are local youth activists who have been involved and active in fighting plastic pollution in their community and our community. And we are just really excited to be able to bring them on as part of our sort of youth activism focus of Environmental Youth Forum to talk about the work that they have been doing around plastic pollution in the community. So first we've got Chloe McKenna. Chloe is 18. She currently attends Eckerd College in Florida, but lives in Orange County, California, and has been working for the last 3 years to fight plastic pollution with an organization called Heirs to Our Oceans. Also with the Surfrider Foundation and with Florida PIRG students. Sam Domingo. Sam is 11 years old and finishing the 5th grade at Oxford Elementary School in Berkeley. He has been in a zero waste classroom for both 3rd and 5th grade, and his passion for zero waste has led him to become a community activist in Berkeley. Together with his classmates and his school chapter also of Heirs to Our Oceans, he's helped fight for the passing of Berkeley's disposable free dining and litter reduction ordinance. So we'll get a lot more about all of their work in just a few minutes. But just to sort of check in with everyone on participating in this conversation, I'll obviously ask a few questions, but we want you guys to ask as many questions as you'd like of our guests. And if you can put your questions into the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen, or it may be at the top depending on what device you're using, just click on the Q&A tab and it will pop up a window for you to type in your question, and I will very happily ask it of our guests. If you would like to just make a comment or say words about the film or the guests, please go ahead and use the chat function and somewhere on your screen you will find the little chat icon, and use that to go ahead and just type in any comments, and as appropriate I can share those as well. But if you just want to say hi to each other, we can all see the chat, and thank you for joining in that. So so let's start off kind of on the easy front. Well, for most of us, we'll see how it is for Deia. So maybe you could just talk a little bit about how the idea for the film first came to be, and maybe a little bit about the background of how the Story of Plastic connects with the Story of Stuff, and maybe some background on that organization as it connects to this for people who might not be familiar with it.
Sure. So yeah, thanks for tuning in, first of all, and joining us for the chat. Story of Plastic came about, we started talking about it like 9-ish years ago. The executive producer, Steve Wilson, and I, he had just returned from a trip to the Philippines through, there's Five Gyres initiative at that point, and was really impacted by the result, by what he saw, the results of our waste being sent to other countries, basically, and wanted to explore this idea of away and what away is and what it means when we throw something away. And at that point, he came to me as a filmmaker to see if I had an interest in exploring that idea. And I felt like I, as a filmmaker, didn't have a whole lot to add at that point, because there have been several beautifully done documentaries looking at plastic pollution and impacts that plastic pollution has on various communities throughout the world. My background was in climate work and environmental justice and fossil fuels, or exposing fossil fuel industry. So as years passed and more of the fossil fuel industry started leaning toward petrochemical development and plastic development, I got more and more interested and involved in the issue, and realized that I hadn't seen a comprehensive piece that looked at the front end of plastics, the production side of things, the build out. And really felt like that was a very important part of the story, if not the most important part of the story, that needed to be addressed. And along with that, the false narratives that the petrochemical industry has been promoting for years, including misconceptions about recycling and where the majority of plastic waste comes from, and the consumer responsibility, all these things that we explored in the film, that we've been told to believe, but that aren't true.
So this is clearly, I mean, it's such a vast and far-reaching global subject. How did you select the people and the organizations that you chose to feature?
Largely through the Break Free from Plastic network. It's an amazing global movement. Thousands of organizations and activists and organizers are part of it, and working in conjunction and partnering around the world to address different parts of the system. And it was our producers' past work and contacts with folks in that network that really led us to the amazing people that we interviewed, and they introduced us to other people, and that's really how we got a lot of the footage that I haven't seen yet in other media, because we had the trust of organizers around the world.
Yeah, it was really remarkable what you were able to capture. So Martin, can you, just sort of watching you, sift through that plastic and pull out things that are just, like those huge mountains of plastic that you're next to, and pulling out things that were impossible to recycle, just how do you manage the feeling of overwhelm or futility when you see the volume of plastics that come through your facility and knowing that they can't be effectively recycled?
Yeah, I think we all face despair in light of some of the major global problems that we face, whether it's climate change or ecosystem collapse or this plastic pollution problem, which the film so effectively shows as being linked to the rest of that, and of a similar scale and proportion, and being global in its nature. And but being part of Break Free from Plastic has been amazing for us. We're a small community-based environmental nonprofit, started in the run-up to the first Earth Day in 1970. So we're celebrating 50 years and have been running curbside collection since 1973, and still find great hope and passion in continuing to do the right thing with recycling. And lots of nonprofits early on helped get the movement started, and then later large garbage companies were contracted by most cities to do it. And we stay in it really to try and raise these issues and try and keep recycling real, and try and make visible some of the ways in which it has been used by the plastics industry to enable more consumerism or their globalization of their product distribution chains. And we actually tracked some of our plastic internationally using GPS trackers because we're very concerned and not convinced by what brokers were telling us. They painted a very rosy picture of the final destinations. And eventually, when we were, our fears and concerns were confirmed, we stopped exporting that, and we've been working to prevent the export of the mixed plastics in particular. These are the non-bottle plastics that really don't have a good destination. And it's been an amazing thing to be a part of Break Free from Plastic, where there's this real camaraderie and mutual respect across global organizations that, historically often are vying for, visibility or credit or funding. And really in this network, everybody's putting the work first and everybody's putting the mission first. And it enables people to then say, oh, well, you should also talk to so-and-so because, they can tell you firsthand what's going on in Texas or Louisiana, or they can tell you what's going on firsthand in Manila or in Indonesia somewhere. So it's been amazing for us to be part of that network and to be a small organization, but feeling like we can really use the power of this movement and this network to punch far above our weight and have a much broader impact than we would on our own.
That's awesome. That's great to hear. Well, and so speaking of the work, I'd love to hear a little bit from both Chloe and Sam, just about, the work that you've been doing to fight plastic pollution. Do you want to start, Chloe, and then?
Sure, I can start. So I started with Heirs to Our Oceans back in 2017 when they were just getting started, and I founded the Orange County, California chapter. And what I wanted to focus on for the chapter was plastic pollution because I attended the Algalita Plastic Ocean Pollution Solutions International Youth Summit that February with Heirs, and that's kind of when my eyes were open to how drastic the plastic crisis really was. And that's how I knew that I wanted to dedicate this chapter to fighting plastics and do more research around solutions to single-use plastics. And, as you're learning about that, it's hard to avoid, the plastic production side of this problem. And I think that's what Heirs really focus on, as we just pretty recently joined the Break Free from Plastics Network, which is a great network, like Martin was saying. So in Heirs as a whole, we focus on, human impacts of our oceans, and plastic being a big one. It's something that we really focus on. And some things that we do with that are brand audits, which we learned about through Break Free from Plastics, and that's where we submit all of our data that we find. But during this time, it's been a little bit hard to go out and do beach cleanups, especially here in California with all the COVID-19 cases. But we kind of took it virtually and have been posting on social media with the hashtag trash tag H2OO. And Heirs have been calling out large corporations on social media like Coca-Cola. So we're still kind of doing brand audits, just in a more virtual way. And other things that we've been doing are hosting a social media campaign around Earth Day. So for 4 weeks before Earth Day, about 3 days a week, we were posting videos of different heirs talking about the different issues that they focus on, from plastics to ocean noise pollution to MPAs. And the idea of the hashtag Rebirth Day campaign is, we don't have another 50 years to make slow progressive change. We need systemic change now in order to protect our oceans and our planet for future generations, which I thought the documentary really showed. And another exciting thing that Heirs is working on right now is the Ocean Climate Action Plan. And we've kind of started the Youth Advisory Council for that, and have youth from Heirs and other organizations around the world weighing in on this United States legislation to protect our oceans. And we're actually hosting a exclusive youth webinar this Saturday for youth 12 to 25 to also weigh in on this legislation, because we really think it's important for youth to have a voice in you know, what our ocean is and our planet is going to look like in the coming years as we're inheriting it. That's just a few things that AIRS are working on, and I'm sure Sam can speak to what his class and his chapter is doing.
Before I did, can you just say how people can participate in that webinar that's happening on Saturday, where they can find
Yes.
information on it?
We have a registration link. I can write my email in the chat too. And you can also look at our website and our social media, but I'll write my email in the chat, and if any youth are interested, you can just shoot me an email and I can send over the registration link.
Awesome, thank you. Sam, do you want to talk a little bit about the work that you've been doing?
Sure. My work as an activist began 2 years ago when in the 3rd grade when I was 8. My teacher, Ms. Umanya, shared with us that plastic was actually being sent to Asian countries like my home country, the Philippines, where it's usually downcycled or possibly burned and landfilled. Personally, I've seen a lot of plastic in Quezon City's streets, sidewalks, and garbage cans. I even noticed that most plastic packaging was coming from large American companies like Coca-Cola. And when Ms. Omani gave us this information, my class decided to go zero waste. We stopped using glue sticks, we switched to compostable pencils, we had parties with just fruit or homemade treats, and brought our own class set of metal utensils to the school cafeteria. By the end of the year, 180 days in school, we reached our goal and just made a small jar of waste, like this one a little bit.
Nice.
This success kind of made us want our city, Berkeley, to go zero waste as well. So we began working with the Ecology Center by collecting signatures for a new law called the Disposable Free Dining Ordinance. We collected these signatures around our local farmers markets. And then we started public speaking. And we had studied about the problems of plastic pollution in school and actually wrote our speeches as part of our persuasive writing unit at school. My classmates and I created speeches on different parts of the plastic pollution problem. Mine was on the ethics of exporting our waste to other countries. Mabel's was about the impact of plastic pollution on marine life and in the food chain. Emmett wrote on the toxicity of plastic production and the impact on human health. And Brazil shared about the power of reusables. We started at the end of 3rd grade and worked through our 4th grade year. We attended city council meetings that lasted late into the night. Well, only one city council meeting that lasted late into the night. But we were hopeful and enthusiastic that the law would pass that night. And unfortunately it didn't. But fortunately, it did pass the second time we tried to pass the law. Passed in January of 2019, and it became actual law in 2020. Me and my classmates believe this step is very essential for our future because there'll be less plastic thrown everywhere, starting in Berkeley, and hopefully will be followed by cities all around the world. I'm really thankful it passed personally because it's a big start to a plastic-free world, and it'll also reduce the cost for cities' trash maintenance and storm water drain programs. Ultimately, the lesser the plastic, the lesser the ocean pollution, which will mean I can enjoy a cleaner ocean and a more beautiful beach. Thank you.
Thank you. You may have answered this already, but there is a question from an audience member from Sue Campbell saying, well, first acknowledging that you are a wonderful activist and asking why you like talking about plastic pollution.
Well, it's kind of like, I don't really like talking about it. I like talking for things that are going against it. Like in my country, the Philippines, there's a ton of plastic. Like even in the movie, you see that there's a lot of plastic, and the plastic's flowing to like Asian countries. But it's like, I don't know why I like talking about plastic. My teacher introduced it to me, and I think I just got really excited, interested into it, and excited to talk against it because it was invading my country.
Well, someone else in the chat just said, great job, Sam, for not giving up. Totally agree with that. So I'm wondering actually, Sam and Chloe, if you're noticing an impact, the work that you're doing, if you're seeing an actual impact on other young people or just other people in your community, that you're actually seeing the tangible, I know obviously for Sam, you were able to pass the ordinance, but if you're seeing the habits of people in your community changing because of the work that you've been doing and the way that you've been speaking out.
Well, I haven't actually looked around my neighborhood for changes there, but I like my family is trying to switch over to no plastic. So yeah, I mean, we have changed Berkeley by passing that law, but like but around like our neighborhood, I haven't really checked, but I'm sure they have seen it. And my mom also spreads the news to her work in like her workplace before this pandemic, and they were all spreading it to their friends. So I'm sure it has gone quite far.
Excellent. And what about you, Chloe? What are you seeing, like particularly even on like college campus now that you're at college, and how you're seeing the impact there?
So at my school, actually, Eckerd College, we recently passed in November the Break Free from Plastics Pledge, and that was put into place in January 2020. So I worked on that campaign in the fall, fall 2019, but it actually started the year before I got to campus. So that the pledge is where that there's no non-essential single-use plastics allowed on campus. So if any department, say like the athletic department, were to go and buy a case of water bottles, the school would not reimburse them for that because the school does not want to support the purchasing of single-use plastic products. So my school is pretty environmentally forward-thinking, I would say. For example, last year, as a first-year student, we were all sent metal straws in the mail, and arriving to campus, we all got stainless steel tumblers and bamboo utensils, so we can like go around campus and not have to use even reusables that are provided by the schools. They're preparing us like with the mentality to bring reusables wherever we go, which I think is great.
That's awesome. So to jump to a few questions from audience members, from Nancy Abadili, wondering what is the role of the lack of clean water supplies in the proliferation of plastics in some countries, and wondering why was this infrastructure question not addressed, whereas waste management got a mention. That maybe is a question for both Martin and Deia, depending on how you want it. So maybe to start with what the role of lack of clean water supplies, what that role is.
As far as not including that specifically in the film, it was just a matter of having to cram an entire global system into 95 minutes. We have a lot of segments of the film that I think are a version of the film that I think are very important that never made it into the final cut. I mean, this story overlaps so many other issues that we had to really every word of this film was cut down. So I mean, that is a huge issue, and that's why we didn't cover it in this film. But also the one comment I have about plastic and like clean water, especially in zones of crisis or camps where people are escaping wars or fleeing catastrophe. Like, I mean, I think if there are any instances where plastic should be used, it is in life-saving measures. It is for, PPE as we go through a global pandemic. It is for keeping people alive who have just made it through a huge earthquake or hurricane and have no access to resources or infrastructure. And that's what it should be saved for, where there is no other alternative. In 99.9% of current uses, I think there is a much better alternative.
Yeah, I would just jump in? You know, water and beverages are such a huge part of this plastics thing. Our first introduction to recyclables and plastic recycling at the Ecology Center was when the beverage industry switched from bottling with refillable glass to disposable plastic, and told everyone that it was gonna be bottle to bottle recycling, which has never really happened. And that was 40 years ago. And you know, the need for fresh potable drinking water, not only internationally, but right here in our country is, you know, in the US, as Flint has demonstrated, but is even prevalent here in California. There are communities that have no potable drinking water. Their water has been poisoned, and they have to pay for trucks to come into their community to bring them potable drinking water, or pay more than they would for gasoline for bottled water. And so, you know, I think it's a really critical issue. There are lots of other ways to provide fresh, healthy drinking water than in plastic bottles. And, you know, those are the things that we should really be investing in. Our public infrastructure for, you know, publicly owned water systems is really critical, and it's under attack globally as large companies try to buy up water sources and control the fresh drinking water on the planet, which is really, you know, is a limited resource. So I think it is a critical issue. The Story of Stuff has a great video called, I think this is called The Story of Bottled Water. I don't know, Deia, maybe help me with that. But they have a great video on the Story of Stuff's website about bottled water, and some of the mythology and some of the problems with it. One of the great things about the Break Free from Plastic movement are these global brand audits. And for years, we've been going out and doing shoreline cleanup, and you know, then we go out and do another shoreline cleanup, and then we go out and do another shoreline cleanup. And, you know, it's just sort of picking it up, but the data was never being collected on who was the source of that. And Break Free from Plastic sort of reoriented how the data from those shoreline cleanups is collected, and now doing these brand audits and aggregating the data globally, we find that the top 3 polluters, at least in the ocean environment, are the bottlers. And that gives us very clear targets for brand activism. And they're very sensitive to customers saying, hey, why are you polluting the planet? So that's been a very effective tool. And Nestle, you know, I bring up water in particular. Nestle is one of the top 3. So great question. And like Deia said, you know, this issue of plastic, it intersects food, it intersects medicine, it intersects health, it intersects so many things, because plastic has now, you know, our clothing, our so many things that it's become a part of, and really being pushed there by the needs of the petrochemical industry, much more than our actual needs as people on the planet.
Thank you, Deia.
Little link to the,
Sorry, I was just making sure that people noticed that you would put the link for the Story of Bottled Water into the chat if you wanted to check that out. Did you want to answer that? Sorry, Dave.
that's all I was going to say too.
So another question from Susie Beatty, wondering if there actually are any big companies that are getting on board with taking responsibility.
I know there's a lot of talk about it. I suspect that a lot of it is greenwashing. I'd love it if they were serious about it. I think the verdict is still out. I think they have a lot of money to put where their mouth is before I give anybody credit on the industry side for really making big change.
Yeah.
Chloe, I know you're doing some brand audit work and brand focus. I don't know if you want to address that. I have a couple things to say too.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, I've also heard, like Deia, that there's a lot of things on the industry side talking about, I think there's something, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought it was called like the Plastics Alliance or something, with some big like plastic companies talking about coming together. They put some money together, but not as much money as is being put into new facilities for like make plastic. So it's just frustrating to see. But yeah.
Yeah, I would say, you know, I've been working on environmental issues my whole career, and this is the fastest moving issue I've ever seen in terms of the public awareness and the brand response and the political, you know, public policy response. So it's quite exciting. Almost, you know, every week there's some new thing coming out, even during the pandemic where everything else is kind of slowing down, or issues are just kind of, you know, stopped. So last year we saw for the first time the whole supply chain come together under the Alliance to End Plastic Waste. So you've got everything from petrochemicals, you know, ExxonMobil to the manufacturers, Dow and 3M, to the brands, Procter and Gamble, to the retailers, Target and Walmart, to the waste collection companies, waste management, all coming together to at least talk about, you know, solutions that might work for all of them. My take on that is, you know, if you do sort of the overlapping circles of interests in the Venn diagram of all their different interests, you kind of end up with a big donut where there's a hole in the middle of like, what can they actually do that everybody agrees on? So I'm not terribly hopeful that, you know, before saying let's recycle more, that we'll see real solutions coming from that. Coke has made some really, and Pepsi have both made some pretty big, particularly Coke made some pretty big ambitious goals. We've heard that before from Coke and Pepsi, you know, really big statements, and then they just kind of disappear into the rearview mirror as time goes on. But there are also some really far-reaching public policy efforts in California. There's a ballot measure that people are gathering signatures to try and get on the 2020 November ballot, which would put a up to 1 penny tax on plastic packaging to pay for more recycling infrastructure and for cleanup. There's the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act, which has been introduced in Washington, D.C. as federal legislation. It's the first serious, comprehensive piece of legislation on waste and recycling that I've seen in my career in 30 plus years. So that's very exciting. You know, it has a lot of industry opposition, so I don't know how far it will get, but to even talk about a national bottle deposit system like the one we have here in California, you know, only 11 states have a bottle deposit system like we do that's been incredibly successful here in California. To talk about one at the national level has been like, you know, the nuclear option, everyone's hair would be on fire. And for the first time, that's been introduced as part of the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act. And it's being discussed in a serious way. There's no way for Coke to meet their goals without a national deposit bill, which they have fought tooth and nail for the last 30 years. So I don't know, I would say I'm hopeful and optimistic, and also at the same time, cynical and, you know, not ignoring history.
Right. Yeah. 30 plus years will make you jaded to some degree and skeptical. So another audience question, and one I was wondering as well, you know, just how you think the current pandemic will affect the future of efforts like yours, or how it already might be. And anyone can jump in on that if they're seeing anything in their experience.
Well, we've seen some really cynical things from the industry already. The American Chemistry Council put a lot of pressure on the Trump administration and the CDC to include recommendations, the FDA, to include recommendations to use more disposable plastic, and have kind of doubled down on this argument that it's cleaner and more sanitary. And in many cases, there's no actual proof of that. They've used some industry reports about plastic bags and reusable bags, which they've kind of manipulated the talking points out of those reports to encourage the end of reusable bags. California, as most people on this call probably know, you know, we phased out disposable plastic carryout bags a couple years ago, and it's had an amazing impact on our environment. And on, like, from our perspective on the recycling side, all that plastic, those plastic bags used to just gum up all our machinery. So it's been amazing. And we've seen a real difference. We hope lots of organizations have come together now to send Governor Newsom a letter saying, hey, make sure that that's a temporary hold to protect, checkers and baggers at grocery stores. Okay, fair enough. But, when things come back to normal, we don't want that to be the new narrative or the new normal, when there are plenty of things we can do to avoid exposing checkers to the virus potentially. For example, you can get all your groceries checked out, put them right back in the shopping cart, roll the shopping cart out to your car and load them into a bag in your car. Or do you really need a bag for, if you're getting 5 things, just carry them out. So there are a lot of things that we can do to continue to reduce our plastic waste, even in a time when we need to be making sure to protect essential workers.
Did you want to add anything to that, Deia?
Just that there's a great op-ed that Judith Enck wrote in Newsweek addressing exactly plastics and the narrative that they're spinning around COVID-19. So I'd recommend that. The link is I kind of messed up the comment, but it's in there.
Thank you. A similar question, with someone else asking around the current situation, that people are using masks and gloves more often now than ever. Do you think their advantages outweigh the disadvantages when using those disposable protections, because it'll eventually fill up our oceans and wasteland?
Well, we're certainly seeing a lot more PPE on the street. Street litter is gloves and masks. I think cloth masks are reusable. You can wash them, you can sanitize them. I would highly encourage people to use a cloth mask. They're no better or worse than a surgical mask in terms of protection that they provide to anyone else. And making sure that we save our N95s for smoke season and for essential workers is pretty critical. But I'm with Deia on, this plastic stuff is an amazing material. There's no other material in our history that's been able to do so many things. Let's not waste it on disposable crap. This is something that we should, and it creates tremendous harm. So when we're going to use it, let's be really thoughtful about it, and let's use it for things where it really makes sense and where there's, an essential use that really benefits us. And then let's really, mitigate and think about the harms and the impacts of it. But, this idea that we're just going to keep using more and more for disposable packaging, and, let's wrap all our apples and bananas in plastic to make them safe from the virus. Like, that's crazy. We don't need to do that. We can wash our fruits and vegetables like we've done for millennia.
So on a potentially maybe positive note, another question about the positive and negative effects of the sheltering in place and the impact on the planet. And if you think that the pandemic has been any help as far as, the recuperation of the earth in any way, or if you're seeing particularly around plastic pollution, if maybe there's any, I don't know if there's enough time to be able to tell, because there's obviously still so much and it's floating out of, it's a long-term process, but if there's any data at all so far about any mitigation of it because of people not being out as much or not buying as much? Or is it too soon?
I think it's too soon. I'm hopeful. I mean, we have an amazing opportunity right now because of this global pause to rethink the systems that are in place and what we want the world to look like as we start things up. I hope that people making those decisions take that opportunity into account.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I'm optimistic. I think, there are some new challenges in our, with our movement's direction. But overall, the problem that industry has created is totally visible and very evident to anybody with, a small amount of common sense. And that's not true for the toxics issue, where a lot of our toxics are invisible and you can't really trace, like, oh, did that person get cancer because of this chemical or not? Or climate change, where you can't really see it, but you know it's happening, you know, and oh, was that storm because of climate change, or was that just a really bad storm, or, you know, that fire or whatever. But with plastics, it's like their label is on it, like that's a Coke bottle at the bottom of the 5,000 feet under the ocean, you know, or a Snickers wrapper. Like, there's no question whose fault that is, where that came from. And I think that gives us a really unique opportunity and hope that we'll be able to create some significant change, because people are seeing it and they don't like it. And there are alternatives, many of them cheaper. You know, this film really does an amazing job of, you know, just capturing it all and putting it into an understandable system framework. But people all along that chain, you know, you can see the impacts directly, and that makes it particularly solvable.
So just, we're close to running out of time, but one question too around the question around microplastics. I know, you know, you got into it a tiny bit in the film, and obviously, again, there's only so much you could cover in one, but wondering, you know, sort of what you're seeing around, particularly things around clothing in areas where, you know, the tiniest of plastics and fibers that we're not able to see, but they're having an impact, and how that kind of fits into the narrative.
As far as actions that people can take, I think, I mean, it's important to be aware of those things and make smart choices about what we consume. But again, it's more, I think we'll get more bang for our buck looking at the changes we can make at the front of the system and preventing the production of this stuff in the first place, and encouraging companies to make things that don't come from plastic, that are biodegradable. And I think, I mean, I am reluctant to say anything is a lost cause, but I think we can have a much bigger impact by preventing this stuff from being made in the first place.
Yeah, I would say, you know, the petrochemical industry and the oil and gas industry right now is, you know, it's teetering, you know, with OPEC falling apart and the prices dropping out, wells are closing, like, you know, and they've been reading the writing on the wall for a long time. They know they're a very fragile industry in spite of their political power, in spite of the total dependence that we have on them. They can see into the future and have spent millions of dollars projecting out different scenarios. And they have doubled down on plastics as a long-term way to hedge their bet in case we stop using so much fossil fuel, or it becomes so ridiculously cheap, or whatever the doomsday scenario is for them. Hopefully, we can put a few more nails in the fossil fuel industry's coffin and really, really, really be pushing in another direction. With regards to microplastic and fast fashion, you know, fast fashion is a huge problem, not only as it relates to microplastics, but it's only works because it externalizes so much of the cost of the labor for being able to make really cheap clothing that changes constantly. And so you know, constantly feel like the clothes you just bought are already out of date. And then the subsidies to the fossil fuel industry that make all the plastic in our clothing. You know, since when does every pair of jeans need to stretch to accommodate America's ever bulging waistline? You know, we don't need all of that plastic in our clothing. We have great other solutions for it. And the only reason it's there is because it's cheap, and the industry needs a place to dump its plastic. And that has, you know, aligned with this whole marketing and fast fashion thing. But, you know, I also feel the counter threads to that fast fashion movement of people really saying, hey, maybe I don't really even want all that crap in my closet. Maybe I just want 10 things that are really nice that I'm going to wear the hell out of. And we see that kind of counter trend also emerging.
So to answer the other question that kind of came up behind that from the original questioner, is whether or not there was anyone working on that subject specifically. And actually, documentary wise, the film that we showed last week in EYF at Home, Microplastic Madness, does address those questions that you're asking. And I would strongly encourage you checking that out as well. It's no longer streaming on Rafael at Home, but they are doing other community screenings and virtual screenings. If you just do a search for Microplastic Madness, it's also another youth-focused, youth activist film about young people in Brooklyn who have really taken on that issue about microplastics. So I definitely encourage you to take a look at that. We're starting to run pretty low on time, but there's a couple just questions, particularly also for Sam and Chloe. Question about if you can tell us more about Heirs to Our Oceans and how people join and when you meet.
You can join, or anyone can join. You know, we are a global youth-led organization, so you can be an independent heir wherever you are. We have, you know, heirs in New Zealand, the Marshall Islands, Kentucky, France, Nigeria. We're really all over. You can also start a chapter like Sam has at his school and is in his area, and like I did in Orange County, California. So you can also start a chapter if you have like a chapter leader and stuff. We have more information about that on our website, heirstoorouroceans.org. I can also write that in the chat later. And, you know, we do have, you know, since all this stuff has been happening, we have been having meetings with heirs from around the world on Zoom. But normally you would just meet with your chapter. We don't normally meet like everyone. Yeah, but just more about it is it started about 4 years ago now, so we're still a fairly young organization, but we really have, you know, expanded our reach to reach a lot of youth worldwide in such a short amount of time. And we focus on issues. You can focus on whatever you're passionate about. So Sam and I are passionate about plastic pollution and zero waste, but there's heirs who focus on noise pollution, MPAs, coral reefs, coral restoration. So really, if there's anything you're passionate about in protecting our planet, you should join heirs because we have a great network and a lot of resources to help you, you know, advocate for that.
Thanks, Chloe. Do you have anything to add to that, Sam, as far as your experience with heirs?
I have a little bit of experience because I joined heirs, I think, in like late 3rd grade, and I've been in it for well, until I finished 5th grade. I'm still in heirs, so I have a little bit of experience. So my teacher actually made me join heirs because she actually made 3 people join heirs: me, Brazil, and Mabel. And so if you want to get like involved, you could ask your teacher if you could join heirs. Yeah. Or you could go to the website and try and join heirs there. You can ask them if you could join, if your teacher doesn't give you permission. You could also like you could do what Chloe said and like start your own chapter.
Yeah, great advice. Thank you. So we are kind of out of time, but a couple people had asked if the film was going to still be available. It's still available on the Rafael at Home site for the rest of tonight, and then that streaming option ends on Rafael at Home. But Deia, do you want to say anything just about where else the film will be and how else people can access it?
Sure. It's also available streaming on Discovery Go and Amazon for a couple bucks. And then you can also check the breakfreefromplastic.org website. There are a lot of other community screening events that are running all over the place, and you can sign up for one of those events similar to this one and have another chance at watching it there.
Yeah, so thanks to Picture Motion who helped put that in place as far as allowing us to do this as a free community screening. Did you want to add something, Martin?
Yeah, just that you can sign up and do your own screening. If you have people that you'd like to share it with, it's quite easy, and Story of Plastic has really worked hard to make it accessible in that way. So, you know, while there are kind of copyright restrictions, and I'm not sure of all the ins and outs of the deals they cut with Discovery to get it into 100 million households around the globe. But if you go on the website and sign up, want to do a screening, it's pretty straightforward, and it's available that way too.
Yeah,
Great.
we made sure that community screenings would be unrestricted because that's
Thank
the
you.
whole purpose.
Yeah. Well, thank you all so much for your time and for all of your incredible work fighting out there for the environment and for plastic pollution, even, you know, in the face of all this other stuff we're fighting. So thank you, you know, every one of you for all the great work. And thank you all for participating and for joining in all of your questions. Have a wonderful night, everyone.